Hi, my name is Insiya Rasiwala-Finn of Blissology, and I'm super excited to welcome you to our Passion and Process video to release the Blissology Yoga Optimized book. It's been a big work in process, and we're really excited. Today is a big day, and I'm so thrilled to actually share some of the behind the scenes conversations with Eoin. I'm married to him, as you know, and I have been co-living this work and breathing it with him for many years. So here we go.
Awesome.
Hey.
Thanks, babe, for doing this.
You're welcome. Can you tell I'm excited?
Yeah, I can tell.
I can
You
see.
should be.
I can see like the light, at the end of the tunnel. It's been a while.
Yep. I really think that nobody on planet Earth has seen. I'm not sure if people can understand how much work it's been, except for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're here. We're here today. And the first question, really, it's a really simple one, is tell us what Blissology is, like really quick,
Yeah. The quick explanation of Blissology is that I believe that there's something inside of us that is infinitely connected to nature, to each other, to our families, to our communities. It's a place of kindness, a place of deep presence and peace. Mm-hmm. And so Blissology is about uncovering tools and things that help us to get more in touch with that place so we can actually treat the world with more kindness, more reverence, and more love.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel those words, when you speak them, and I know that we really try to live and breathe them.
Yeah.
What's your vision for Blissology? And how did this book Yoga Optimized come about? Like, what's the why behind it?
Related to what I was just talking about, the idea of having both wisdom and kindness, I was actually realizing that, yoga, the book is actually, it does have a lot of philosophy woven through it, but it starts at a really technical level. The bulk of it is really a beautiful way of understanding and embodying the mind-muscle connection that's required to do these complicated poses in gravity. Because people think about yoga as a spiritual practice, and it definitely is, right? And it will make you kinder. And, there's a whole yogic concept of ahimsa, which means non-harming, or I like to translate it as cause as little harm as possible. But then for me, from my perspective, I've taught yoga to over 300,000 people. And when I look at people doing yoga poses, they're like, oh, I'm doing this spiritual thing. And, probably 85% of the people I actually see little kids crossing the road with no parents holding their hands. I'm like, you can absolutely get hurt doing this. And I got injured doing yoga, where I actually made flexibility the number one thing that I was doing. And I just basically realized that people know more about the operating systems on their phone than on their body. And so just to give you one more analogy, and I just thought about it, like people just go to yoga class, and it requires a lot of wisdom. Okay, just back to what I was saying, wisdom and kindness. So we think that we're being kind towards ourselves, but actually, if you don't take the time, like it'll take you about 5 hours to read this book, but if you invest the 5 hours to do this book, and there's a course that goes along with it as well, then forever, every time you do your yoga practice, it will be such a radical act of kindness, because you will be able to not practice one size fits all yoga, but you will actually be able to make the poses fit you. And that's my ultimate goal, is to give people that sense of steer. So kindness was one part of Blissology, and the other part is wisdom. It actually takes a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of physics involved in these poses, and my job is to distill it down and make it easy and interesting and not overwhelming, so that the everyday practitioner can get the benefits of this practice that we all love.
I hear you. And actually, one piece I wanted to pick out from your words is this one, that yoga is a spiritual practice, And I think we get a little confused there sometimes because we think that when we're doing something spiritual, we're not going to hurt ourselves.
Yes.
Right? And what you're doing, if I'm hearing you correctly, with Yoga Optimized is you are bringing this back to, you're starting yoga from this place of physicality and biomechanics and understanding the muscle memory piece and that control and that awareness so that you can then practice yoga and not hurt yourself.
100%.
So you can have this physical practice, but then you're also on this spiritual journey and you get those other benefits.
Yeah.
Of yoga.
And that's it. And that I want people to have the attitude of my body is a miracle, right? It is an absolute miracle. It is a temple. And it's been given to me by the universe, or maybe you have a spiritual connection to a power greater than you. But somehow we ended up in this beautiful body, and it's a miracle. And the way I see it is to not take the time to figure out how to optimize it. And at the other end of it, if I'm doing things that are actually harming it, I mean, that is actually a very spiritual lesson in life, like to be given something and take it for granted and possibly harm it when it's a miracle and something that needs to be treated with kindness and reverence and wisdom is completely missing the mark.
Yeah. So why did you pick this name, Yoga Optimized? I know this was a big process as well.
Yeah, the name, it's like naming a child. It took a long time to come up with the name. But I mean, I do believe that it's called Yoga Optimized. And the idea is that we can, reference in what I was talking before, we can optimize our physical function. And we can optimize this antenna of the body as well that will help to pick up our more spiritual side, our more kind side. So the optimization comes, I just like to think of it as, look, your body will last a long time. I cannot believe, like the other thing for me, like what's inspiring me to write this book is even with my practice of yoga, I mean, if I wouldn't have practiced yoga at my age, I would be completely broken. But this is the interesting thing. If I kept practicing yoga now the way I was practicing 20 years ago, I would be almost as broken. Like my yoga practice was actually hurting me. And that's kind of the point is that, and then so getting to the optimized thing. So I basically learned from other teachers and I took the time to learn the biomechanics and educated myself at different schools. And I had all these different influences to heal myself because I did get an injury.
Yes.
And then, so the lowest bar is I don't want anybody to get hurt. But kind of the medium bar is I want people to get the most out of their practice. But the top bar, the highest bar that we can possibly clear, and this is where the optimize comes from, is having a body that I'm not even sure if people know how good they could be feeling until they feel the way I feel. And I'm passionate about giving people these tools. Like if you were going through the forest and you found the fountain of youth, you wouldn't just be, oh, I got the fountain of youth. Now don't tell anybody.
Some people might.
Some people might, right? And that's a spiritual lesson there too, right? But I'm thinking, God, I mean, you might if them getting in would lessen your ability to make yourself feel good, but it doesn't. It makes me feel better. Happiness is best when shared. I'm happier when other people are getting in that pool and going, wow, I can feel amazing too. And that's what I want to do is amplify and just spread this out as much as possible. I want as many people on planet Earth feeling as good physically as they can, knowing that when you feel good, you spread good, you tune into a place in your mind that feels amazing. And it's this beautiful interplay. That's what's so amazing about the yoga practices. Is it a feeling? Is it a shape? Is it spiritual? Is it physical? It's both. It's all of it. And one interacts with the other. And it's a beautiful interplay.
It really is. And I mean, we're at this really interesting time, I think, right now, where there has been a lot of research that's been done on the benefits of yoga. And I think we're understanding and seeing how it actually can help us, and there's two questions I want to ask you. One is, how long have you been practicing yoga? And I know it's been a long time, so if you can share that a little bit. And then how do you see this book helping us at this stage in life, and talk about yoga optimized and both thriving as well as aging well in our bodies?
Yeah. So, God, I've been practicing yoga now since 1987. So I have to do a little math on that one. It just depends on when people watch the video. That's why I'm not saying in years, because if I say a certain number of years now, when they watch it a year later, it's hard to say. But yeah, I've been practicing for a long, long time. And so your question was, how do I see it with as far as aging goes?
Yeah, and also how do you distill this knowledge, I guess, in Yoga Optimized?
Okay,
right?
yeah. So 2 questions. One is the distilling the knowledge question is actually a really interesting one, because I rewrote the book 3 times, because I'm constantly amazed. For example, right now I'm just writing about how to do Ardha Matsyendrasana. Just a little twist.
Yeah.
8 hours a day. It takes me to write about this pose. There's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of potential damage that can be done if we're either A, too forceful, or B, too passive. And okay, so do I expect people with their busy schedules to go through this complicated textbook? And there's a lot of people that would love to geek out at that level, but most people don't have time, and so they're like, what do I really need to know here? So I can what's your top level summary? I can't go to kinesiology school for 2 years to learn how to do a twist. And so what I've done is I've actually, the real work of learning anything is to break things down into principles and categories, and that's what I've really feel that I'm really proud of. It's not just what the information is, but how it's organized sequentially, and how easy it is to digest. And I can't remember who said it, but God, you might know. Someone said, "Oh, I didn't have time to write anything short, so I gave you something long." So it's taking me a long time to distill it into easy packages for people to understand, and to put it into a system that's just calms the overwhelm and helps people to really up-level things. So that's one of the major ways that I'm leaning into as far as transmitting the knowledge. And that's why it's taken so long. In a way, the best way I can describe it to people is I don't want to say I'm like Mendeleev, who's doing the periodic table. It's not that radical, but it is kind of radical. The way of organizing things in yoga taxonomy and stuff like that, it is a kind of periodic table for yoga, meaning that there's all this information out there. There's this wild jungle, and we use the term yoga taxonomy, and now there's different families of poses and different principles that we use for the feet, and you just repeat them over and over again. And it actually applies to all this stuff. And that's what took the years and decades to distill down and not overwhelm people with complication.
No, actually, I would describe it also from my perspective as you're a bit of a mad genius.
Yeah.
And what I have loved is and I think this is something that you've honed over many, many years of teaching things, back from your days of teaching windsurfing, really, as a teenager. What you're really, really, what you excel at is understanding patterns and then helping people to see those patterns. And once we start to understand these patterns in, for example, here in this book, it's in how the body moves and how, as you say, the families of poses have certain characteristics and principles that you can apply to each family. I think that's what makes this work really exciting, because there's a lot of people out there who have all the knowledge of kinesiology and biomechanics and everything, but what you have really done is distilled that information into these bite-sized pieces that I think people can really get. And I think that's what makes it so fun to get into.
And when you say it, it's actually good. It's kind of like a therapy for me, because it helps me understand why. Why am I do believe I'm not good at a lot of things, but I do agree I'm pretty good at putting things into categories that people can understand as a teacher.
Yeah.
And helping people understand the underlying patterns of things. So they're not understanding just steps to do things, but they see the larger pattern behind
When I
it.
think that anyone who's taken a Blissology class or workshop or a training with you, I think in their own practice, we start to see, and I've experienced many of our trainings, obviously, but I love that because every time I step onto a yoga mat, I feel those things in my body,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't have to rethink it.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, for me,
it
I was
comes.
actually thinking when you were mentioning that, my brain went to why am I like that? And I realized that, you know, Blissology is about bliss. And a lot of people think bliss is like, oh, I get a massage somewhere on the beach and I'm in bliss. And,
Yeah.
you know, but I think one of the most, or, you know, I'm in a mountaintop somewhere meditating, I'll be at bliss. But I think one of the most underrated forms of bliss is actually learning something. I mean, you know how much time I dedicate my life, you know, 2-3 hours every day to just learning stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a joy for me. I love learning. It's exactly what we talked about. It's a form of reverence for life. I mean, when people tell me they are bored, I'm like, you could be learning about, you know, flowers. What's the color red about? Like, how do we get red? You know, there's so many things that are just so exciting when you start looking into them. And so for me, first of all, I love learning things.
Yeah.
And the way I learn is to see the patterns and things. If I learn just one-off things of this works this way and this, but if I can integrate it into my overall map of the world and apply it to what I'm actually doing in my life, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I got it. And so basically, because I love life, I like to learn. And because I like to learn, I like to break things down into patterns. And that translates as a teacher of I'm just sharing the patterns of how I'm breaking it down in my system and trying to share. And in the process, not overwhelm you like, oh, I've got this boring textbook, but actually share the same passion that's underlying.
Yeah.
You know, I hope people get that fire.
I think it's very felt. You
Yeah.
know, I love the book with all the drawings, the illustrations that you have done again, and just different ways of constantly of bringing awareness and showing and explaining things, but in unexpected ways. You know, and I think that is really what sets this book apart. And actually, one big question.
And I'm learning along the way too.
Yeah,
That's what's cool.
I know.
It's
It's
like
you're going down a lot of rabbit holes as you've been writing this book.
Yeah.
Tell us who this book is for. You know, that's a big
Yeah,
question.
that's
that
actually
keeps
really good
coming up.
because I was worried when you said the rabbit holes that people might be like, oh, I can't read a book about rabbit holes, even though you'll love the rabbit hole parts of it.
They're pretty cool.
But what I've done is actually organized. This is why I had to write it 3 times because my last way of writing it was really good, but it only spoke to people who were had that deep desire to sort through a lot of technical knowledge. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to just hit people at the top of the pyramid. I don't want to just talk to yoga teachers. I want to talk to everyday yoga practitioners. I want to talk to people who've done yoga 10 times in their life. In fact, for this book, one of my targets is like stiff guys who do athletics who are, you know, oh, I'm too stiff to do yoga. I'm not doing that stuff. Only bendy girls do it. And I really want those people, these athletes in the book. But that's kind of a side note. So what was your question?
No, who is this book for?
Oh, who is the book for?
And
Yeah.
actually, on that note, I just remember a couple of weeks ago when some friends were over to our house, and our friend was sitting on a chair saying, "I can't sit on the ground," and he's probably younger than you are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And he's someone who's active.
Yeah.
But he can't sit on the ground.
Yeah.
So this is something we're dealing with in life every day. And I guess, you know, the way I see it is yoga optimized.
Well, there's the optimization. It's like, yeah, I guess it's for anybody who wants to optimize the temple of their body.
Yeah.
Meaning that, okay, at the lowest bar, you should be able to sit in the ground. Okay. But that's not optimizing your body. That's like just getting yourself out of a not pathological, but we're going to call that a less than optimal way of going through life and gravity. Okay, so I want to at least get you so you can sit on the floor. Sure,
Yeah.
that's the low bar I'm talking about,
Yeah.
or that you don't injure yourself every time you try and sit on the floor. But the highest bar is I want those people to go, now I can not just sit on the floor, but this is the thing about the book. This is what's really interesting about the book, is what I've learned is that the skills go way off of the yoga mat. Like that person, if they apply what I'm talking about with the foot arches and how to use what we call the duo lines and all these other things, like not only are they going to be able to sit on the floor, but they're going to be able to jump higher, run faster. Obviously, you're going to be able to do triangle poses and handstands better, but so many other things in their life, and that's what the optimized is. Mm-hmm. Like it's one of these conversations about like health span versus sick span. Or like, I mean, we're doing healthcare versus sick care. Like, yes. I don't just want to take people out of being sick, right? Like being well is okay, but I want you to be awesome. And that's where the optimized comes from. And okay, if I can only deal with, let's get you out of being sick and let's stop yoga injuries, that's going to be amazing, because there's a lot of yoga injuries, and a lot of them are even things like, oh, when I do pigeon pose, my knee clicks. It's not like I have to go to the ER, or, oh, my wrist doesn't feel so good. All that stuff, that is not good. You're not like, oh, when I do this, my SI joint doesn't feel so good. All those little things are going to disappear in people almost, if there's really something pathologically wrong, like some kind of disc degeneration or something, like I can only do so much, but you'd be surprised about how many things will disappear if they apply these principles. Like I felt it in my own body. I've seen it with thousands of students, and that's what's lighting me up about sharing this.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I can feel your enthusiasm.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I can feel how passionate you are about bringing this out into the world. So why are we doing a Kickstarter for Yoga Optimized?
That's a good question too. I mean, the point is, one of the reasons why it did take me 10 years, besides having to categorize things and the actual writing process, is that it's hard as doing what I do to take time off. Like a lot of times you get an advance from a publisher, and so you have income. Mm-hmm. Well, that's happening. You can finish the book. But right now, actually, I'm so glad you're on the other side of what you've gone through. Between that and when you got your diagnosis, I realized like I'm not going to travel. I'm not going to go anywhere. But what a lot of people don't realize is if I don't get on an airplane with what I do, it's basically like a retail store closing their doors, right? So I'm just like praying to the universe, saying, I really want to get this book out there. I'm not going to travel so much. I'm going to just stay in one spot and finish this book, which I think will really shift yoga and the way people look at their bodies, even off of their yoga mat. Mm-hmm. But in order to do that, I need to not travel and stay focused on this. And that's why we're reaching out to our community to do this Kickstarter. And we've come up with some amazing prizes and incentives that are super inspirational, that the good vibes will be shared. And that's why we're reaching out for this in Kickstarter way, crowdfunding.
It's going to be amazing. And you know what? This book is going to impact hundreds and thousands, millions of people around the world.
Yeah.
I think once this knowledge starts to spread.
Yeah. And it's like anything, just to wind this whole conversation up. I mean, I hope so. But even if it impacts one person, it'll all be worth it. Even if one person comes up to me and said, my knee used to feel horrible. I couldn't pick up my kid and now I can. I'll be happy. But I hope it does impact thousands and millions of people, and I think it will.
I think it will too.
I got a little teary saying that. That's true. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for our passion and process. And, babe, thank you for being here.
So happy I could.
Yeah. Oh, God. So many ways.
It's a good day.